Okay, so the recording started. This will pick back up where we left off. So where we left off was we had this list of all of our stocks. We need to convert that to an array. So we would call that something like
EPL or APL?
stocks again. So stocks equals nd.array. All right. We found out on Tuesday it's not nd array. It's not nd either. It's mp array.
Did you already
We did.
What's the number?
It's import numpy is np.
That's it.
All right, so np.array, and then we feed it whatever list that we want to convert over, in which case ours is stocks, right? Okay, so that converts our stocks variable over to a numpy array. And then from the numpy array, we can pass that into our matplotlib. So you would want to import matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. That's the standard for matplotlib. If you haven't installed that package yet, you'll need to go into your terminal, pip install matplotlib. Make sure that you do your pip freeze requirements after you do that so that it updates your requirements file. Matplotlib.pyplot as PLT. And where am I getting this from? If you guys go back, not to that video, let's go back to our content. If we go to our matplotlib documentation and we scroll up, you're going to see that we use this. Okay. Import matplotlib as pyplot PLT. That's where I got that info. All right. Now what we want to do is plot. So we use plt.plot and then we pass in our numpy array. So let's come down here and we're going to say plt dot what?
Sorry.
Plot. Right? So plot stocks.
Install matplotlib.
Yeah, we install matplotlib. Then at the top, you make sure you import it up there.
Okay.
All right. So down here, we're going to plot those stocks. And then for that to actually show up, we need to do plt.show. That will actually show our plot. Over here, you're going to want to make sure that you have your side view open. So you have side view open and you click on plots up at the top. Okay. Once that works, we hit play. And bada bing, bada boom, we have a stocks going up. All right. Now, is this really what we want to print?
No, don't we want a JPEG or a PNG file?
Yeah, but what are we actually trying to print?
The values.
The closing value.
We were supposed to be printing not the stocks, but the closing prices, right? So we don't want stocks in our MP array. What we actually want is the results from our get closing. And in the closing, we want to specifically just say Microsoft for now. Right? We'll get to the whole for loop for our list later. Right now, we just want to make sure we can get one thing to work. So as we plot this, we want to plot, we're going to change this as MSFT closing. All right, and we want to plot the MSFT closing. All right, does everybody see those changes?
Yes. Okay.
All right, so we're just hard coding Microsoft in. We're going to call our get closing function, which does what? Yep. So let's put a comment in here. Get the closing price for the last 10 trading days. Okay. Okay. If we run this, now we actually have a chart that we're looking for, right? So now as we go to the right, we have what? The days, right? So 2 days in, 4 days, 6 days, 8 days, and the last one's 10 days. Going up, we have what? The closing price of whatever it was, right? So we should probably throw some labels on these. And to do that, if you go back to the documentation, you can see we use plt.y label and plt.x label to use the X label. So let's set that up real quick. We plot that plt.x label. And what is our X label? Days. And our plt dot Y label is what? Closing price. And then we'll show that. Let's go ahead and print that. Or play that. There we go. So now we have closing price as a title over here, and we have days over here on the lower right.
Mhm.
Now, is that really helpful on days?
Market's actually open.
Business days?
But I mean, this just shows us the last 10 days. What would be more information or better information instead of just
So like the actual date?
the actual date, right?
Okay.
So let's see how we could go back and get the actual date to be passed out through with us. So here we said the period of 10 days, that got us the last 10 days. We would actually need to go look that up. Here we just pulled out the close. Does anybody remember what else we had in our history? Let's print out our history real quick. You remember our history here does have a date field, right? It's actually a date time field.
Okay.
So if we wanted to add our date into a list, what could we do?
We could do like also pass his or maybe for every element in this, just make it a tuple of the closing price and the date.
Okay, that's one good way of doing it.
And then,
So to do that, we would say for price in hist, right? And we would want, how would we do that? We would just say for day in hist. Okay, and for each one of those days, we need to append to our closing list what that is. So we would say closing our closing list dot append. And we are going to append this tuple we create. And this tuple, the first one is our what? Day date, right? That's the name of this column here, date. And that will be comma day and our close, right? So we're appending this tuple inside of here that has the first value as our date and the second day as our date close.
Gotcha.
We can get rid of this guy here. So now if we print this, we should be able to see all of these come back. And let's see, string indices must be integers, not strings.
Oh, doing good.
Day close.
Is the date being passed as a string instead of as a date object?
Very well could be. Let's try that, print day. See what happens. Just says open. So day is not what we want to pull back here.
Well, okay, so that's pulling everything from hist though. Because that's for each day in hist, for each entry in hist, print it.
Right.
So we would want to do,
Well, we just called a variable day.
so it's
So we're trying to go through hist. So if we go back one step and print hist,
Oh, I see.
so hist is this column here.
And it starts with, oh.
But notice date is actually not one of the column headers as it goes through.
Oh, okay.
So we would have to figure out what that would be and what these dates are in each one of these. When we said close, that's where we pulled like open, high, and all of those.
Yeah. So date is not one of those fields.
Doesn't look like date is one of those fields.
Take the alternate approach of just, well, that'd be a lot worse.
So if we print hist dot keys, which I don't think will actually work, but we can try it. Nope, there we go.
Yes, I
So
look-
those keys gave us back all the different keys that are available.
and none of
Now this
those-
D type and all this, what that ends up being is a pandas frame, which we're gonna get to next week. But this would give us the individual options.
Okay,
Um,
so then is it just printing out the date? How's it getting the date then?
it's obviously part of one of those frames.
Oh,
So let's go back to our documentation on Y Finance. Let's see if Y Finance gives us something. Okay. Let's go to the homepage. All right, so ticker, we can use the history to get the history data. We could tell it to pull specifically given dates, but that would be a little more difficult because we'd have to make sure we didn't have the right ones. So if you watch last year's video, that's what I did then. But the better choice, let's see, where's our wiki? Wiki, Y Finance, ticker,
I'm gonna be honest, champ, I just opened the project.
Interval,
what I'm trying to do
period.
When I close out of this, I go to file and close my project that I'm currently on, so it takes me back to that menu, because you, like, if you leave it on a project that's just open, you just close it, it'll just reopen to that project. So I'm trying to get in the habit of closing it, but basically that's all I did, I opened it from my quick start menu and it.
All right, so this returned a data frame, which we don't necessarily want to talk about data frames
This
yet,
goes to the
because
point
that's more
sorted
next
that, then
week.
I'll tell you that I created a new, like I deleted the previous Git repository and created a new one so I could follow step by step from Jason's video from Tuesday.
So let's
So literally this morning I got everything.
let's undo what we just did there and go back to just simply pulling our
I'm
price.
Probably a troubleshoot or fix for it. but I
Make sure our
don't know
code
why-
works again.
why it- we're told by-
Okay, so that all works. We have our days. We would probably want more of those dates in there is what we could do better. But for the time or the purposes of this homework assignment, I don't necessarily request that information, right? All I say is that you need to store it in an array, which we did, and then we need to plot those 5 graphs. We can add as much information to the graphs as you are exploring the documentation for Matplotlib. The minimum is it just needs to show 10 data points, which if we look here, 1, 2, 3, right? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, what's the problem with these days?
they're starting from zero. Going
Starts
to
from
eight.
0, right? So we would want a way to at least start that with 1 so that we could go up. So let's look at this and let's see how we could do that. We could see on this plot that we have the numbers of whatever's here and here for the other side. So what's a way that we could do that with our array?
Sorry.
Can't
So
we just do the
This will be a stab back at your 360 days, right? So let's calculate the length of array. Do we know what that is?
Array dot like
No, just calculate
just
the length of your
len-
list.
Just len of array.
Len of whatever your list is, right? So the len of our, in this case, we should be able to do it with our array. So let's do MSFT closing, right? This will give us a value. And then if we wanted to create a list of all those days, what would that be? Anybody remember how to create a list of numbers from a range? Range, the keyword I just used, right? So range, and we want to start at 1 and go up to what? Whatever the len of our
Yeah.
array is, right?
it's dot length for C++. I apologize.
Yep. So that gets you, this will create a list. And so we're going to call this days equals this. And then when we pass in our plot, we're going to pass in our days as that line.
For
And then it'll get us our X and Y axes.
Right. So let's try it.
what?
And it says X and Y axes must have a first dimension, but shapes 10 and 9 and blah. Okay. I probably have these backwards. Let's try that again. And I may not have the right amount of variables in there either. Before we do that, let's print days and make sure I have days right. And before I print days, let's print our array. So MSFT closing. I don't think this len is right, and I know why, but I want to show you why. So let's print. So let's scroll back. All right, we have all of these in our array, right? And then when I tell it to print this, here it just prints range, whatever, right? What are we actually missing there?
The
We just need to create a list of this, right? That creates a list back for us. So let's try that and see if we get our days correctly. There you go. So now we have 0 starting at 1 and we go to 9. What's the problem with that?
We need
10 days.
We need a 10 in there, right? So
Oh,
let's
because the range is +1.
clear that list. So, right, we need to take our len. We actually need to calculate +1, right? Because we're starting at index. Right, we usually start index 0. We wanted to start with a 1.
Yeah, and,
So we
and
need to
range
add.
doesn't include the.
we
doesn't
just,
count up to the number.
it still prints out 10 and we just like shift it to start point.
Right.
So,
The problem is range goes up to, but does not include the last one. So if we just use the len, we actually need to add 1 to it. Okay, so this looks better. We printed out our array and we printed out our list. And those values should match up. And now if we look over here on the right-hand side, we should see that we are getting our plot to work correctly. Right? We start at 1 now, and then it goes across. But we still need to figure out a way that this actually prints those intermittent days, right? We don't want it to count by 2s. So let's look at our documentation and see if we can find that. So let's get rid of these lines where all we have is now our array. We have our days one, and then we're going to pass this into our plot as we go through here, given these individual labels. So let's go back to documentation. And let's see if we can find a way that we can specify exactly what's going across on this axis here on the x-axis. Anybody see what we can do there?
Sorry. I was looking at the wrong spot to get that plot.
Just doing subplots. We can control the line properties.
Oh, it's Ben Lincoln, the chairman of the Democratic Party as well.
Axes. Anybody see anything yet? The idea is that we want to change this interval so that it's not intervaling by 20 or 10, and in this case, every 2, right? We want it to interval by a certain amount. So one other thing that we just found in that documentation that we may want for this graph is what are we normally missing on this graph?
Title.
Title, right? So let's throw a title in there that makes sense. So plt.title. And in this title, we could put something like the last, let's see, closing price. Closing price for, and then instead of putting MSFT in there, let's add our string of whatever that is, right? So this would be our first stock. Right now we're hard coding it. We'll come back and we're going to create a loop to do that for us. So let's do plus MSFT for now. Let's run this. Now we have a good title to our graph. So we're starting to make some pretty nice graphs here. The key right now is we got to figure out the interval for the x-axis. So see if you guys can search through here to find the interval for the x-axis.
Is it the axis one?
Sorry, hold on. What'd you say?
Is it the axis?
This
Dot
axis
axis?
right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one would show us specifically what's in there, right? That gives us 40, 60, 0. I don't really see what that is, but let's see if we can figure out what that does.
I have one that's the plt.axis, and then it lets you input values, and it looks like that's correct.
Yeah, that's what he was just mentioning here. So what we can do is see if we can print that into axes the way it's getting called there. So instead of this, we would say plt.axis, and we would just pass in days, right? That should get us what we want. That comes back and says it must be an interval of X min, X max, Y min, Y max. So we're going to pass in a specific list that gives us our min and max for each side. What that would allow us to do is figure out if we wanted a little bit of a buffer here and not give a space. So it's not wrong, but what that would allow us to do is what? Calculate the lowest price out of our list and then maybe subtract, I don't know, 10, and then take the highest price in our list and add 10. That way our graph has some buffer between it. Same way with our days, we could add a buffer if we wanted to there. The only one that really matters for us on this one is a min of 1. So we would put 1 and we would put 10 because that's our X max. Does everybody get what I'm getting there?
So do we no longer need our days variable in those parameters then, or?
We still do. I'm just going to put this as a comment here. So our form for X axes here is that we have an X min, X max, Y min, Y max. If we don't provide these last two, it just does whatever it comes out with. All right. So let me get a little bit more information here so we can describe what we're doing, right? What are we doing wrong? Not commenting our code, right? So let's comment our code, make sure we got that. This plots the graph. Then we need to set our X axes min and max. That's this code. Set our labels for the graph. That's that code. And then finally show the graph. All right, let's rerun that and see if we get what we're expecting. And it still says it needs to be the form of all of these. So if we're going to use axes, we have to pass it a Y max or a Y min and a Y max. Anybody know how we would get that?
We have we need our Y min and Y max.
Right. We have to have it if we're going to use axes.
Personally, I would just print out the closing prices again for our 5 stocks and find the lowest and then the highest and put it in.
So how do you do that with Pythonically though?
Oh,
So that it would adjust for every single one of these.
I don't know.
All right. Does anybody remember what we could do? We have a list of all those prices, right? All right. How would we arrange them? That would, we could do an NP arrange that would arrange them. But the moment we do that, it does what?
You can't change.
Well, when we do that, it changes all of our days around, right? It would put them in a linear line. So we need to make sure that when we copy that, that's what I'm getting at here. When we copy that, we need to make sure that we're doing a deep copy. Does anybody remember a copy and deep copy from 360? So from 360, we got to import copy. And there's infinitely better ways to do this, but I'm trying to reuse what you guys already learned. So if we import copy, then when we come down here, we could get the output of get closing, which we already have, right? So let's do, how do I want to do this? We need a new one that would be the same result of this. So we would have prices here equals, and we're just going to go get that same thing out of that same list, which isn't ideal, but it'll work, right? Okay. When we get our prices, we can do prices dot what in order to get it in alphabetical order. Does everybody remember? Sort, right? So sort will basically put it from least to highest. Then what is price is going to get us at that point. So prices dot. Our price is what?
No.
The first index is going to be our low price, right? And our high price is going to be which index?
Length. Like, or like, yeah, it would just be length, wouldn't it?
Be 9 because we know we're always going to get it back as 10 in that array, right? What's a better choice than hard coding the 9?
Use the length.
We could do that and then subtract 1. What's an even better way?
Just a keyword at the end of it.
You guys don't remember 360 a whole lot, do you? You
No.
should have came for the class before this one.
I'm gonna have to start.
Anybody remember negative indexes?
That's right.
No.
-1, right? That always gets us the last one in the list. All right.
Yeah.
So now what we could do is plug that into our axes here, in which case we have 1, 10, the low price, our high price. Everybody got that?
Oh, that's our low index or high.
Get our min and max for Y. There we go. We're gonna clean this up, but as you guys remember, you always have to do it the long way at the beginning to figure out what you're doing. Then you can clean up your code. So if we run this,
What's in the course?
okay, what did that do for us?
It stuck it so that now it's,
Got us all of our days, and it made sure that the top of this graph maxes out at our max price and starts at our min price. And we also have our 1 to 10 going all the way across now. Okay, if we wanted a little bit of fluff in our graph, we would need to add some fluff in there by doing something like low price -10 and maybe high price +10. All right. And if we run that, that gives us a different kind of graph. Now 10 may have been too much because we didn't have a whole lot of fluctuation here. So maybe something more like 2.
Is it like 5?
that's my first minute.
There we go. Something like that gives us a little more range as we're going through there.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. But we now have our 10 days across the bottom like we were hoping for, and we have the closing price going up.
So question.
Yeah.
Looking at this, is 1 the most recent price and 10 the oldest price?
Good question, right? That's the problem with not having dates on our graph is we don't know which one's the last 10.
So, I mean, if it is, could we just change it to like days ago?
You could do that to days ago. So 1 day ago, 2 day ago, 3 day ago, if that's right, but it looks like the price is climbing, right?
In that case, it'd be.
Over time.
decreasing.
So what we would want to do here is let's print our hist again and see with which value comes back first. The first value in that list is 10 days ago. Then it goes 9 days, 8 days, 7 days, 6 days, 4 days,
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
So our 10 is our most recent then?
Yeah, so 10 is yesterday. Assuming that yesterday was not.
Yeah, so 10 would not be days ago. 10 is
Today.
today, basically.
Is there a way that?
Although we shouldn't get today because closing today would not be accurate.
Indeed.
Yesterday.
It would be equal to the open price of today, but
So, I mean, can you have the axis reverse? Start at 10, go down to 1?
we could. And what would that recall? What would we have to do in order to make that work?
Sort. I know in assembly it would be D, a C for descending, but I don't think that carries over here.
So the problem is we don't want it to descend, right? And we don't want to sort it because then we throw the days all out of whack.
Okay, true. So.
We can't really change the indexes. We would have to take index 9 and make that index 0, and then take index 8 and make that index 1, right?
Mhm.
And keep doing that all the way through.
Could we just print the dates on the lower axis, or is that like a whole nother method step?
So that's what we found out is we don't know how to pull the dates out of a out of a
Wait.
pandas frame yet.
So.
We have them, but we don't know how to pull these out of a panda frame yet,
For
which is
our,
what we learn next week.
plot.axis, we have 1 then 10. If we did 10 then 1, would that functionally reverse it?
Do what now?
For our plot.axis, the first 2 items in that list are 10 then 1. And then low price minus 2, then high price plus 2. If we did, or so right now it's 1 and then 10. If we do 10 and then 1, does it reverse it? It does.
Here?
Yep.
It would, but it wouldn't be assigning the right parameters.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I think
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could. We could start
Oh,
at 10 days
because
out.
that
and one.
does also reverse the data.
It doesn't reverse the data, it just changes your labels, is all it does.
It-
Well, it should have.
So now it's the same problem, but it looks different.
Right, it actually went the other direction in that. So this is 10 days ago, 1 day ago is down here. The goal was to try to figure out how to better label this bottom section here. All right, so here was what we started out with, or what we eventually got to. We know what our closing price is, we know what our days are going across here. But what does this represent? And this 10th one here means today.
Yeah.
Where 1 actually means 10 days ago. So I like your idea. We could actually flip-flop this. And that technically shows what was here. And then we would change this to days ago.
So it starts with, well,
So
no,
we would say
because
days
10 is
ago.
still showing today.
Yeah, it did reverse the.
Because
the
10 is
graph.
showing today, 1 is showing 10 days ago.
Right.
So we just do 10 minus n days ago.
10 minus n days ago.
For our,
For our
axis
label?
Yes,
You can do that.
these are stock people, they know math.
At the end of the day, the goal here is that we need to get more information, right?
Indeed.
And so right now, this is the best that we can produce in a graph. So I'm okay with that. That's the whole point, is that now we need to figure out how to use data, data frames, so that we can actually chunk out more data out of there.
Like, leave this stuff Simon in the next 4 days, and it'll be set in the back of my mind, like, damn, I wonder how.
So, let's look at our overall code. We're supposed to do this for what? 5 of these, right?
Indeed.
So let's see if we can do a better way of looping through all of these stocks that we created. So we know for each one of these that we need to loop through that, right? So let's do our stocks, and let's do something like for stock in stocks. What does that do? That gives us our stock ticker, right? And that's really the variable that we need to arrange for each one of these codes. So if we go in here and we tab this over, instead of MSFT closing, let's use something more like stock closing,
And this is.
right?
Okay.
And then this would now become stock. And this would become stock.
Mr. Dr. Professor Jason, sir.
Yes,
I'm
I'm only one of those.
Can we just put this into this whole thing that we're doing right now, this for loop? Could we not just put it into a function?
You could put it into a function, and then you're still gonna have to pass in each one of these, right?
Okay.
So in that function would be a for loop, is what it would be. So you could call all of this code down here, print graphs, and that's exactly what it would do at that point. All right, so for stock, we have that stock. Instead of MSFT here, this needs to become stock so that we use our variable. All right,
Yeah, and then-
now it's going to pass in our ticker, go all the way through. On this get closing, this needs to be stock as well. Come down here, closing price, and then here, instead of MSFT, we can just put in stock. Now it will dynamically change all of that in our code going up.
Now will that print 5 graphs?
Yeah.
In theory, we should get 5 graphs back.
Or will it only print the last one?
And you can see it's printing out all 5 of those graphs. Cool. Now we're printing out all this information, so we need to kill this hiss down here. So that we just do what this program was meant to do, which was print 5 of these graphs.
So it printed all 5, like,
And you can go back here and
Okay,
click.
that's what
yeah.
I was gonna ask, if you could go back and view those, or if it would just, you can only view the most recent one.
Nope, it prints
Just
them all
of
in here.
For all the runs we've done?
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna go back and kill them all. And then if we actually run it, we should get just 5 of them back.
And then we do plot dot or plt dot plot for,
There you go.
oh, it's just stock. Road.
So we could actually look through each one of these and see how we're doing on each one, right? Apple's going down because they just announced the iPhone 15 and USB-C. And they realized they just caught up with Samsung from 20 years ago. Just kidding, all iPhone lovers, just kidding, just kidding.
No, I thought it was really funny, cause a diehard iPhone user like, no, this is bad, I'm like, their lightning port was just a modified USB-C, that's all it was.
So if we look at our requirements, let's make sure we got what we need. So initial comments with your name, class, and project at the top of your pie. Boom, got it. Proper import of our packages. Boom, got it. We don't need these two, so let's get rid of them. Store this information in a list that we convert to a array, and this is where I got ND array. It's just array. And I need to update that on the website. So let me just fix that real quick here so we don't get everybody confused. Stop it. All right, here. This is not a ND array, it's just array. And NumPy, great, save that.
How many commits did we need again for the?
We needed 5, and notice how I'm not doing so hot on that
Okay,
5, right?
'cause
I
when
should have committed once I got 1 to work. Then I should have committed again, that I got it dynamic.
When I restarted mine this morning, I already have like 3 or 4.
That's good.
I didn't remember how many it was, so I was just committing literally every 2 lines.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do a commit. Because I obviously was not following my own directions, right? So we have, what do we have here? Added matplotlib.
Oh, wait. Ask if you could choose it to-
We
Okay.
graphed
Is anyone else having trouble? with
all 5 stocks
For some reason saying low prices out of rate.
and what else we got? Showed graphs. I don't know, whatever you want in here, doesn't matter. Once you get that in there, again, make sure you're always doing a commit and push. And we're pushing that code out.
Like, you're gonna do that, you would cut the whole code, right, and then paste it into a Word doc.
Okay. So the next step here is plot these 5 graphs. Feel free to add as much information to the graphs, which we did, which was adding all the stuff, making sure it shows a minimum of 10 data points, which we have. All right. Next step, save these graphs in a folder called charts as PNG files. Do not upload these to your project folder. The project should save these when it executes. You want to add this folder to your git ignore. So what does that all mean? 1, we need to create a folder in our project, right? So we create a folder called, what did I call it? Charts, right? We need to make sure we add this charts to our git ignore. So we could either open up our git ignore and add it at the bottom here, or better yet, if we right click on the charts folder and go to git, and under this we have add git ignore, right? And we could add it to our git ignore. The problem is we want the charts folder, but we don't want the charts themselves to get submitted to the git. Does that make sense? So what we do is we don't add that to our git ignore, right? So we need to take that back out, which we can do by just going to our git ignore and take out charts. What this means is before you submit it, make sure you wipe the charts out of there. Does that all make sense?
Question.
Yeah.
When you added a folder.
Yes.
Was that, how did you do that?
I just went to my top folder,
Okay.
right click, new directory. So now we got to actually save these as pictures, right? Right now they just print and show on the screen. So we're going to go out to our handy dandy matplotlib, and we need to figure out how to save these. So let's go out here. If we keep scrolling down, logarithmic, blah, 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 image tutorial. All right, what do we got here? Image tutorial, this imports images, not exactly what we're looking for, right?
Yes, show me the graph of the bug.
So let's look at intermediate. Nothing there. Advanced. Colors, text. Tell you what, let's just use the search bar. Save. Save or scatter plot as a GIF. API. How to. Save multiple plots to one PDF file. Not exactly what we're looking for. We just want to save the plot file, right? So we're going to need to find documentation, and trust me, there is a way to do it. Just got to find documentation on how to do it. Anybody know how to do it yet?
I'm working on getting my photo run agreement right now. Creating, viewing, saving that plot with pictures.
There you go. How do you do it?
Oh, I'm still ready.
There
I just found the.
you go. When in doubt, Google it out, right?
From the courier.
All right, here's animations. Big save, right? So what does that mean? We simply come down here and go to PLT show. We go to PLT dot save fig, right? And save fig requires where we're going to save it.
Destination, which
All right.
be.
So for us, it would be // charts. Actually, we don't want to go back a directory. Sorry. We would have charts / and then maybe the name of whatever we're saving this file as, right?
Which would probably just be the.
Which we can't really string together here. So that means before up here, we need to call this something like save file equals, and we need a string charts / that plus whatever the stock is, right? It's our stock plus .png. Then inside our plot save config, we just put save file. Everybody see why I did it that way? This allowed us to build our file name dynamically using our stock file, our stock name.
Okay.
Then we save that config out. So now let's try running it. We should get our 5 graphs, which we did. And if all went well, we can go up to our charts folder and we can see we have 5 of those in here. All right. These we could add to our get ignore file, or we just make sure we delete them and never commit them. All right.
Name is, oh, because I have PLT.
Now, if I come in here and look at just this image, I should see this, but I don't, right?
I'd only save the last one as a blank picture.
All of them are blank.
That won't do.
That won't do.
Does
So what do we need to do?
Put it before show, because maybe
Put it before show.
Takes it all the way out.
You got it. So let's take this. Let's put this up here at the top. We're going to add a comment here that saves plot. And then we'll finally show the graph at the end. So let's try that. Okay, process finished. We could go to our Apple stock, game, Microsoft, and Sony. Okay. So now that we have all those, let's go back to our program.
So it looks like it just overwrote like what you already had in there.
It did.
So putting it in the get ignore, even if you just run it here, it won't.
Right. It'll never commit. As long as we leave these in red up here, it'll never commit them. The idea is making sure when you go to commit, make sure you don't blindly come up here to version control or unversioned files and actually commit those. As long as you don't commit them, then you don't have an issue. You don't have to change anything. So let's update this and says save pictures to /charts or to charts folder. That's fine, right? That's fine. And we're up here in our main project there. We need to make sure we're actually adding that charts folder.
Okay.
Okay, so we did that. Let's commit and push. And then we'll push. You gotta click it and add it. So if you click on this one up here,
Wait, it said get crown.
right click, new
Just a
directory.
program that just-
It doesn't show up.
No, it, just do a commit and then we'll go out and check our GitHub. You're correct. You're a step ahead of me. You're gonna find out that it does not actually create that folder in your repository. So if I come out here to my repository, we can see all of this. And we can see that I just added 2 days ago, which is obviously not the right repository. So not pushing it out right. Oh, it's new. I gotta put new at the end. And show more. Refresh.
Okay, I think. No.
Obviously, I'm not associated with the right account. So give me a second here. It's one of those, it's not you, it's me things. All right, so let's go back into GitHub.
It saves it, but it doesn't show it.
Now quit logging me in. All right, let me go back to my other. Forget, I have to do this in different windows. There we go. Is GitHub new in here? It is most definitely not. All right, refresh. It's on there. Refresh.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so for whatever reason, it doesn't want to show the repository, but if I go here and I just tack on new at the end, it still does not show. This is what can be funky when you're playing with some of this stuff. It should be showing here. Oh, there you go. That's correct. We didn't change our requirements file or any of our other stuff in the last 2 days. We just changed our main. But as Josh pointed out, it did not create a charts folder, right? Yes.
Shouldn't it also updated requirements? Because we added a couple.
You should, yes. I did not run that command,
Oh,
but I need to, right? So let's just double check. Do a pip freeze and greater than requirements. Make sure we got everything in there correctly. Notice it did not change colors up here, which means nothing changed for me. Okay. So what do we need to do to add this in here? Well, one, if we delete all of these files, right? Delete, 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 delete. If we now go ahead and do a git commit, and it says no changes, right? So here, see git, add, see this little plus where it says commit directory? Commit the directory, nothing changed. Okay, stand by, git, add. There we go. Now I added it to the git commit. Oh, for goodness sakes. Okay. It needs something in there in order for it to actually commit that up, right? So there's 2 ways of doing that. One, you could just come in here and add it if you wanted to. So you could create a new folder or do that. Or we just need to have our Python code automatically create our charts folder when we start. That's a good way of doing it too. So how does we do that? How do we get Python to create a folder for us? Does anybody remember that from 360?
Oh, that was like the very end of 360.
All right, so let's go back out. We'll go to automate the boring stuff.
Reading, writing files? Or is it-
Yep, reading and writing files. Chapter 9. We can see where we build our paths out. For name and file name, operator to join, current working directory, home directory, absolute and relative. Aha, creating new folders with OS make DIRs. Okay,
I feel like I'm making.
so
a
we want to just create one from scratch. You can also use the from pathlib import path. This is the more preferred way of doing that. So let's do just that. We are going to, from here, come in at the top. And from pathlib import path. And then down here, before we create this whole shebang, one of the first things we want to do is create our charts folder.
Okay, and this is
Eight.
right after git closing.
Yeah, after our function's defined.
Okay.
It's one of the first things we want to do in our project. And we will copy this in just for the sake of it being there. We can see that we don't want this relative path. We just want to create charts. Right? And we're going to put that in quotes.
Okay.
And what that will do is add charts to our current working path.
Charts dot.
Everybody see how that works? All right, so now if we delete charts up here, delete, and if we go ahead and run this, and see that it went out,
We already have that.
and then it created our charts folder and put it in. Now, if we already have our charts folder, AKA, let me delete those out of there, and we rerun this, we're going to get an error that says that charts already exists, right?
So if charts, then, or if not charts, then.
More like we could put this error in here, right? Specifically file error exists. We could wrap this in a try statement. So if we try to create our path, and if it accepts on that error, AKA file exists error, then we can go off and do something else, right? In this case, we're just going to pass. So we're going to try to run this. If we accept on this error, just pass this out. All right. Pass just continues on. Exactly. Yep. We could do a print statement and say log file already exists, right? If we wanted to in our project.
Can we do something that it just overrides the current file or?
We don't care if it had one in there. We wanted to create, you know what I mean? We're only trying to create it if it doesn't exist.
Okay.
Now, it might be smart to trash it if it's in there, right? And just blow it away, but maybe you don't want to do that. So the whole idea here is that you have the code in order to try to create that directory. And if it doesn't exist, or if it does exist, continue on out. So the whole point of this is when I check out your program, charts isn't going to exist. It'll run fine. If I run it again, it's already going to have charts in there and keep going on.
Is there a way that like, okay, so say rather than overriding it, like we just care about it, creating a new charts folder.
Right.
Could we just, if, let's say our charts folder already exists and we run the program, could we get it to just create like a charts 1 file or a charts 2 or so on and so forth?
Extra folders?
Yeah.
You could if you wanted it to, yeah.
You could probably do it to where you could like.
The
charts-
parameters of the assignment is that it needed to be in the charts folder.
Okay.
If I rerun this again, we should get it. We should get our 5 images up. Okay, so let's come back up here.
Sorry, can you look at your try accept statement one more time?
Yep.
I'm getting an error. Try.
So access file exists error, or you could just do accept, right? You could do a blanket accept and catch that, but it's better to do it a specific error. What we would really want to do here is our logging. You guys remember logging at the end of Python? This is where we would add it to a log that the file already exists, but we wouldn't necessarily print it to the user. I'm not going to worry about logging for this particular project.
So back to the random question.
All right, does anybody have any questions here? We don't have to add it to the repository because our program's going to generate it.
Oh.
Very.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Basically, wait. 3 minutes to finally figure out.
I did. Okay, hear me out though. What changed?
I think they just like polished up the colors and the textures just a little bit.
Okay. All right, so now that we have that in, let's go back and check our graphs here. So save the graphs in a folder called charts as PNG files. Don't upload the project folder. In this case, it shouldn't say project folder. It should say charts. The project should save these when it executes. All right. You may want to add that folder to your git ignore. So to make sure that we never accidentally upload this, Now we can go ahead, right click on this and add to get ignore. Okay. And what that does is just make sure that that folder never gets uploaded to GitHub. All right. So we need to go to git commit and we need to say set up charts folder to build if missing. Okay. And added to get ignore. Okay. That's all there. Let's commit and push. Push. Okay, all good. All right, let's go look back at our requirements here again. There should be a minimum of 5 commits on your project. Well, let's see if I made that leap. Refresh. I now have 7 commits, so I'm good. I should have a lot more, right? We did a whole lot of stuff and I jumped without doing that. So that's not good. I think the next projects require 10 commits, 20 commits, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
The point is I'm trying to get you to commit often, right?
Yes.
It's not, please don't make a character change and commit, make a character change and commit. Like you should be making changes all the way along the way. All right. Let's see. I will be checking out the master branch of your project. So please be sure to include your requirements.txt file, which contains all the packages that will be needed. You can create this with the output of pip freeze at terminal. We already did that, but it's always a good idea to come back down here, run it one last time. And as long as your requirements does not change color, if it changed green, that would tell you that there was changes and you need to recommit that to your Git repository. All right. The very last 20 points, which is, if you can't count, a very massive chunk of this project, there should be a readme.md file in your project that explains what the project is, how to install the pip requirements, and how to execute the program. Please use GitHub Flavor and Markdown. So that goes back to our README file. And if we look at our README file over here, we see this. We have this project here. Description, this project will be using the packages NumPy and Matplotlib to create 5 graphs in the output. This is our pip install instructions. So the last thing I need is how to run this program, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would we run this program?
Well,
Because they don't have PyCharm, right? So you need to explain how you would run this program with your stuff.
so for you mean salt Python?
It's a little bit overkill.
Go to google.com
I would say
on your keyboard.
kick over to online GPT compiler.
So you can click on something like how to run, and then in your comments or in your triple ticks, right? Is it ticks? Yeah, it's ticks. 1, 2, 3. There we go. And get rid of that Angular stuff in there.
Why does it keep doing that?
It just picks the first one in the list. All right. So what we want in here is Python. What?
Immersion or
No, if we just want to execute this file, what do we have to run?
Python Go.
On about.
Yeah, if we were to execute this on a Windows terminal or a Linux terminal, how would we run our Python file?
You navigate to the directory.
No.
You saved it to, and then you
Type in what?
Python dot, or your main.
There you go. Python main.py. And that will execute.
Oh.
All right.
So just
You guys overthought that one way too far.
Just save the file, open up a command prompt and throw up execute.
Now this runs. The only thing that in our project, let's go ahead and just push up our README. Now, obviously, you guys will need to get better at your READMEs, right? There should be a whole lot more than just 3 lines. The idea being that this is your documentation page. If somebody checks out your code, they got to figure out what they're doing.
So when you want to say like in command prompt, run Python.
You could do that
In the terminal enter.
in a terminal window. Please type the following. Something like that, right? Okay. And you can look out at other GitHub projects, see what kind of language they're using, the headers that they're using, see what makes sense in there. Okay.
Now is Python, just typing Python space main.py, is that universal across Linux or Windows?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you're wanting to use a specific version of Python, in which case you would pack the version on the end of it. So say you had Python 2.7 installed plus Python 3.11, you would need to put in Python 3 to use Python 3 version. If you have multiple versions of Python installed, you have to use Python 3.11
Okay.
main.py in order to use that specific one.
Better tell Jason to use 3.1.
Don't do that. All right, does everybody see how those requirements and how this project came together? Now, what's the problem with this project together so far?
Other than the dates.
What's that?
We haven't picked our stuff.
There you go, right? So right now I've hard coded all these stocks in, right? We got it working, but it doesn't really, doesn't take in from the user what stocks they may want to graph out. So how would we go about that?
If you really wanted to, we could go and maybe like get a list by popularity and have it be like a little.
You could do that. This project is to use the collect the last 5 stocks of your favorite stock tickers. So you're not wrong, right? So like grabbing the last 20 or the top 10 or whatever, that's one project, but this project is to grab your 5 favorite.
So it's just in that stocks equal brackets, we can change those.
Yeah, right. We hard coded this, so it would be best if we got this information from the user.
What stocks equals input and then the bracket, or like, could we use a pen for this?
So what we should probably do is kind of like what you were saying earlier, is we should move that one piece into our into a function of some sort, right? So def print graphs or something like that. And then for that def print graphs, we're basically going to take all of this code and we're going to put it inside that function, except for this stocks, right? Let's get that out of there. And that means we need to pass in stocks here so that we actually know what we're passing in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So now we have a function to get our closing. We have a function to print our stocks. And we should probably have a function to get the stocks from the end user, right? Get stocks. So this get stocks is going to be something like type in a stock ticker for us, right?
Yeah.
So let's do a test on that. We would have something like print. Please enter 5 stocks to graph, right? I don't know, something like that. So what we could do then is prompt them for the stock tickers. So print enter stock ticker number, right? And then we need to plug in a stock ticker number. So to do that, we could do a for loop, just keep it simple for I and range of 1 to what? 1 to 6, right? Up to, but does not include. So for I to 6, we could print I, and then here we're going to say plus stri. That just converts that number to a string so that we can make this nice little uniform menu. This needs to be in. Okay. So now we're going to have them enter in a stock ticker. Now, we should probably make sure it's a valid stock ticker, right?
Right.
It's probably a good idea. So to find out if it's a valid stock ticker, what do we got to do? We could, but how do we actually test it's a valid stock ticker?
Well, if we try to,
Exactly, right? We need to have something that tells us whether it's in a list of stocks. So let's go to our Y Finance. And let's see if there's any way for us to test if it's an actual ticker, right? So we go there, we can get the history. So it's the news. Ticker objects. This allows us to get multiple, which we could use this option, but we're not going to right now. Logging, pandas, install there. So it looks like the best way for us to test whether or not that works is if we can execute this command.
Okay, so,
Right.
oh, so then we can just do try if, and then if not, it just kicks them back up to that loop.
Exactly. So we could do something like try this, right? Now, the problem with try is it can probably execute this. The problem is we don't know what's going to happen when it comes back. What does it give us, right? So if we call this stock, for example, and we try some blue, blah, blah ticker here, what happens? So let's not put this in a try. Let's just try it and see what blows up. So if we call get stocks right off the bat, and then we execute this. It gives us through this code, do this, stock dot equals y ticker, nothing broke, right?
Aha. Parabola.
Does that make sense? No, nothing broke. So let's print stock. And let's see what stock actually is. And we got this y ticker object. Well, that's not great, right?
Hmm.
Because we're getting something back. We're getting a ticker object even on gibberish.
So when do we go and actually try to pull the data? Because when I put in, the reason why my Apple wasn't working is because I misspelled it. It couldn't find a valid date object. 10D wasn't a valid like date period for a stock that doesn't exist. So we know
It was probably, the idea is that we should be getting something back for that one.
yeah.
Because right now we're not even doing, we're just checking our ticker, right?
Mhm.
So if you notice, if we do a .info, we should get the stock info back for that. Let's see what comes back out of our stock.info. And we should be getting back something that says nothing, right? There you go. So what happened here? Enter stock number 1. We come down here and it says no URL found for blah, 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 blah.
All right.
Does everybody see how that worked?
Mhm.
So the reason is we're using YF ticker and then we're passing it in. And then we have stock.info and that fails.
Oh.
Before you were using history, right? And you were getting some error there. So instead of using ticker, we could try stock.history and calling that.
So we can do like, so we can create stock equals YF.ticker and then in the try statement, try to pull the history. If the history fails, then we just rewrite back over the original stock, try it again.
Yeah. Or the idea here is that we get this error, request HTTP blah, blah, blah error, right?
And that
So
happens.
now we come back to your try this, right?
Oh.
So we try to do our stock.info, and if we accept on a request exception error, blah, then we could fail. Now, if we request on exceptions error, blah, 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 the problem is we don't have the request modules installed. So it would easier just be to do a blanket accept at this point. And we could say print that is not a valid stock. Please enter another.
So for this is, so we're in a for loop and it's in the range of 1 to 6. If we do I minus to increment I by 1, will it still iterate 6 times or is it just going to check as long as I is less than or equal to
Well,
6?
you just totally blew up C++ and Python together.
Oh, sorry. I forget you don't have plus plus. Sorry.
Yeah. So what we really want to do here is, why is this skin? Yeah, I know it's a broad accept. That's fine. All right. So you're right. We're in a for loop and we're getting this in. What do we need to always do when we gather input from a user?
Thank you.
Right. Well, how did we do that in 360?
While.
While, right? We always put our stuff into a while true loop. So we say while true, print enter stock number 1. We gather that stock from the user. So we say stock, or let's say ticker equals input, and we get that input from the user. Right. And then once we get that input from the user, we want to try that here, which is now ticker. And then we try to get the dot info and we see if that works. And if we say that's not a valid stock, we start this loop back over again, right with the same number that we already had. If this works and we get stock.info, now what do we do?
Break.
Break, right? We break out of that while loop and then we go ahead and collect the rest of those different stocks. Now, this is great, but what else are we missing here?
But we don't have anything to put there.
Yeah, we don't put their stock in anything, right?
Yeah.
So stocks equals an empty list. Before we break, we say stock, actually, it's not stock here, it's ticker. So we say stocks dot append, and we're appending our ticker in. All right, at the very end of this, once we've actually done this and we've got all 5 of those stickers, now we return our stocks. And then we could go ahead and pass this all in. Now, we could either do stocks here or we could get our global variable of stocks. That's probably the best thing to do for this particular case. So we're going to start with stocks equals an empty list up here. Does anybody remember how we use a global variable inside of a function? Global, right? So global stocks, that allows us to modify that list. So first thing in our program, this is going to be how it starts. Start a program. We are going to call get stocks. That's going to go ahead and go out and gather all the stock information, upload our stock list. From there, we need to call what?
Sorry.
Yep. For that stock, right? So for stock in stocks, get closing of whatever that stock is. And then we need to go ahead and print that graph as well, right? So print graph stock. Everybody see how that works?
So you just did.
And since we're really not using this list, right? We're not modifying, adding it, doing anything else. Instead of doing that global stocks, in other words, that's overkill for what we're trying to do here. Let's go back and just do stocks equals an empty list. We're not passing anything in. And when we get the results of this, we're going to put this here for stocks.
And then for stocking.
Does everybody see why I did it that way? If we were going to be adding more stocks to this later on beyond the 5, then we would have it in the global variable so that we could use it, modify it, and pass it back and forth. In this case, we're just going to go get our stocks, pass it back to our list, and then start looping through that list right away.
So for stocking, get stocks.
So let's try our program out. Let's see what we get. Okay. Enter our stock ticker number. I enter in gibberish. Says that's not a valid stock. Talk to us over again. So now it's Microsoft. That worked. Let's go to Apple. That worked.
Is this case sensitive with the tickers, or can you put it?
It seems to work.
Okay.
Anybody got another one? GME? Is that the other one we did? I don't remember the other ones. I don't know. I killed them. What other ones did we use?
What's the last one?
Sony was the other one. Yeah.
And
So Sony.
NTDOY is Nintendo.
All right. Then once we got our 5, you can see that it starts chunking out graphs.
Closing price for T or A?
Yeah, that didn't really work out well, did it?
It kind of died.
So what happened here?
No, it didn't.
Let's go figure out what we did.
Oh, one of them is not typed in correctly. Because that's the exact same error that I got when I typed it in
For this lower A one.
possibly. But it still went through.
So what we really need to do is have a better program here, right? So we may, when we go to check that, we may want to print something like checking blah. So maybe something like print checking ticker. And if that all works, we could print valid ticker. That'd get us through that part, right? And then when we go to print our graphs, maybe we say, oh, that's why we have stocks and stocks.
Stocks, is that a stocks? Is that a stocks?
Yeah, we wrote print graph to pass in all of our stocks. We wanted to just print one stock. That's the
Oh.
reason we're having that issue. So when we print stocks down here, right, we just want that one stock. So we would just take in print graph stock. And we're not going to do this in a for loop anymore. So take all this back out as no longer a for loop. Code dedent. Dedent. Where are you, dedent?
Is it like alt tab or tab or
Shift tab. Maybe. Yep. Okay. Does everybody see why we did it that way? Now, the other part of this is it's going to sit here and try to create charts every single time it lives through. That's probably a waste of code. We should probably do that at the very beginning of this project and not part of printing the graphs. So let's move that code probably right inside our start of the program. Okay. All right, so now that we have this, and you can see what happened here is it tried to chunk every single one of these out. So let's go ahead and just delete everything out of here. Let's retry our program. And so now we got our stock ticker. So we have Apple, checks the ticker, comes back, says it's valid. Enter in another one. We enter in gibberish, check the ticker, that's not valid, try again. So now what do we have? We have, forgetting all my stock tickers. Microsoft. We had GME, Sony, and what was another one?
NTDOY is Nintendo.
NT what?
DOY.
That's not correct.
That's not on NASDAQ, that's on
Oh,
Japanese stock market, gotta be on NASDAQ.
worked for me.
Did it?
NTDLY?
DOY.
DOY.
NTDOY.
Oh, actually, we should probably check.
So now we got a valid ticker. It's going to grab those closing prices. Spits out our 5. We got those out in a new chart
Dang, that
and we're good to go.
didn't go up at all.
Didn't change. That is.
Hasn't changed much in the last 10 days for
Well,
Nintendo.
their direct was this morning, was the
Well,
thing.
it'll show tomorrow. Right?
So if we go to Git, make sure you always finalize everything with a Git push. Oops, I didn't change my Git commit comments. Don't do that. Update your Git comments.
Don't be evil.
All right. Now, if we go back through all of our requirements, you should have everything, see, man, in there, including your README. Make sure everything's solid, and then you can go ahead and upload it. Now, come back out here and refresh. Make sure everything's what you expect it to do. When you get a new project like this, go back into your PyCharm, check out your own project as a different title. You know what I mean? So I come up here and I grab code. I grab this here. I go into PyCharm and I go to close this project.
Open it as a new VCS.
Get a new VCS, plug this in. Now this won't work because this directory is going to be called the same thing, right? So call this something else. Call it gibberish on the end or whatever you want. Doesn't matter. And clone it. Once you get it cloned, you're going to need to set up your virtual environment. It's automatically going to pop up. It also recognizes that you have a requirements folder. If you just click OK, it's going to do all that for you. AKA, you don't have to run pip install -r requirements.
That's nuts.
So it'll take a little bit to build out all the packages. And what do we get here? New project gibberish. You didn't like my gibberish comment. So what we do is hit OK. That's fine. It created us an interpreter. That all looks good. We can click on our Python packages, make sure that we have the packages installed that we want. What happened? It didn't work, right? So all we have to do is come in here and do exactly what our instructions tell them to do. Pip install -r requirements. and it does it.
Oh, wow. That's a little- That's a big one. Man, that's-
This is where it takes a little while, right? Because every time I install every one of your projects, it's got to re-download everything. It can't cache it. So
Yeah.
I found out like 2 days ago that the Bethesda's creation engine that they've used since like 1990 or whatever, it doesn't have caching. They just load everything up, assets and everything.
all right, so now if we load our main, we run our main. Notice how we don't have charts up here, so we know we're good. We need to execute our main. So normally we would just go into our terminal and tell it to do that. Looks like it's actually still installing everything, so let's let that finish.
So for our project, this is how you want it to look, like, you want us to have that, what we just did the last 10 minutes, where you input those 5 stocks?
Yeah, or something. Yep.
Okay, not just change. what
You
we
could
had.
just hard code your 5. You could have it to where it has them input it. It's whatever you want.
Cool.
The goal was just to get you to understand how both of those would work, right? So I'm in this project now. I would do Python main.py,
I was just gonna ask what.
ask for my stock tickers.
I don't think the inputs are a bad feature.
Still can't remember the other one that we did.
SKU tap.
Microsoft?
That was it.
Microsoft, Apple, Sony.
Okay,
no.
so it did it. We should see our charts pop up. Now, if you don't bring up that side view, it'll actually give you these figures and it'll pop up.
Also, does it just open all 5 of them stacked?
It would actually, the way this is doing it now is it's just bringing up one at a time. So that's why side view works well. But the reason it's bringing up each one of these like this is because I ran it from the command line. We're not
Oh.
using PyCharm as a whole. It's actually printing those all out.
And then now it's created.
Yeah.
Cool.
Then once they're all done, we go to charts. We got our charts. We know it works. Always check back out your project, make sure it executes like you would expect it to. It may work great in your environment, but if I check it out and it's broken, I grade off the broken one. So take the extra step to go check to make sure that it's exactly the way you would expect it to.
Gotcha.
All right. We'll stop the recording.